Well, I've taken quite a bit of time putting this video together. Making cabinet doors, some people believe that it's very difficult, and it's really not that bad. But also there's many people who've asked me, I want to do a kitchen renovation and replace the doors. And you can save literally thousands of dollars by making your own doors and refitting them to your existing cabinets. So today we're going to jump right in and show you how to make some cabinet doors. So before we get started, let's quickly look at an existing door. So the center part is called the panel. The two uprights, and you notice that they're the full length of the door, these are called the stiles. Between the stiles, the little connecting pieces are called the rails. And the way we remember these, rails are always horizontal, like rails of a train are horizontal. Stiles are always up and down, and they're like stiles in a pasture, like in European pastures. When a farmer wants to go from one pasture to another, rather than put a gate in, they put a stile, which is steps up and over. So up and over, and the sheep and cows won't go up and over a stile, and that's why the farmer saves them from putting a gate in. So stiles up and down, rails side to side. Now, in order to put a panel in, we need to cut a slot in these components here. So first of all, let's have a quick look at some ways of cutting slots. So in making doors, the rails, the bottom parts, the horizontal parts, they always have slots from end to end. The upright parts, they will have slots. Sometimes they will be stopped like this one, and sometimes they'll run all the way through, and we'll show you that in a little bit. Now, typically there's three places of making slots. One of them's on a router, and on a router you can use a little cutter like this, a little circular cutter like this, and it sits in the router in a router table like that, and it will cut through. And this one you can actually tell that this is cut with a slot cutter, because if you look at the end, you notice there's a little bit of a transition. You can tell by the lighting that there's a little bit of a transition in there, so it doesn't give you a real clean cut. The second one is an upright bit like this, a straight cut, and the way it works is you actually do a plunge cut in the router and run it through like that, and that gives you nice clean cuts like that. And of course there's always pros and cons to each of these. So the first cabinet frame we're going to make today, we've already cut the slots, and we're going to do a pocket hole version, and you can see that the rails are already cut end to end. Now we're going to make pocket holes in the rails and connect them to the uprights, and you can see that the uprights didn't go all the way, and that's so that we'll have some wood to drive the screws into, and you need to be fairly careful to get a good bite of wood in there so that you can get the screws in. So I'm going to go ahead and cut one of these, and then I'll show you, and then I'll cut the rest off camera, and then we'll do the assembly. So when you're putting holes in these, you have to be careful that you don't run into the slot here, because that's going to compromise your screw. Now at the top of these jigs, there's some couple of little marks right there by my thumbs, top of my thumbs, and what I do is just align those up in the middle of this area right in there, so that there's just wood in there. And you can do that pretty simply by eye, because you're looking down at everything, and you can line that up by eye pretty easily. So I'm just going to go ahead now and make those cuts. Now, when you're working with pocket holes, you need to, with all doors, you need to make sure that you mark your face edge, and I use blue tape, as many of you already know. And the reason for that, you might not get your slots exactly perfect in the center, and it doesn't matter if they're not perfectly in the center, because the main thing is that they all line up. And if you get them mixed up like this, you could have one of your slots higher or lower, but it doesn't really matter if they're perfectly in the center, as long as they always line up. So with pocket holes, because the pocket is in the back of the wood, we need to turn them all upside down, because we're going to be driving nails. Now, One of the issues with pocket holes is that when you're driving nails in or driving screws in, sometimes that screw will find a path of its own, and it will move the wood by itself. And last week when we made this squaring jig, one of the things I installed was hold downs. And when you're doing pocket holes, especially when you're doing doors, you need to hold these down because you want all of the face sides to be even, so that when the door is complete, all of these face sides like this are all nice and flat. And sometimes you'll have different woods of different thicknesses, but you always want this side, this is the face side, you always want that to be even. And even if your wood is a little bit thicker, maybe you had to make another part and it's a tiny bit thicker or thinner, if you do it this way, you'll always get that side flat. So that's why we do this upside down. Plus, of course, we need to have the holes for the pockets. And that's why we have to do the hold downs for the same reason, because, and this one actually works out nice because it holds both of those down. So I'm just going to go ahead now and drill some holes in here and put these together. So there's my pocket hole frame, and I didn't finish it because as I was putting it together, I could hear the wood was cracking, and you can see at the end here, actually all four corners actually cracked. Had I known that, I would have pre-drilled this, but this was just sort of a test to see what you can do. You can see the frame isn't laying flat either, which is another issue. So you know what, you can use pocket holes to make cabinet doors, but there's some challenges with it. You'll have to use some good quality wood, and take your time, pre-drill. Might be an ideal thing maybe for a workshop or a garage or something. But I wouldn't use anything like this for a quality cabinet door. Now the next door is a lap joint, so let's have a quick look at how we go about cutting these. Now, making lap joints is easy, but it's tedious setting things up, because when you align the tops and the bottoms, you want them as even as you possibly can. So I've set this up. It's not going to be perfect, but it's very, very close, and then we'll show you how to put this together. Okay, so in all cases, I'm going to be cutting off the part that's the thinnest, and that happens to be on the bottom of the face side. Now, this is one of the only times that you can use a miter gauge and a fence at the same time, and the reason for that is because you're not cutting all the way through the wood. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut all of these pieces here. So the assembly of a lap joint is similar to that of a pocket hole, but we flip these two sides down and the middle sides up, and that way we are able to overlap them. Now what we're going to do is glue these together, and you'll notice there's no slots in these. So what we're going to do is glue these together, and then we're going to make something called a rabbeting cut on this, which is quite different for door making. So we'll just go ahead and glue these up, and when this is set, we'll do the rabbeting cut. So there's what the rabbeting bit looks like that I'm going to be using. In a moment, I'm going to plug in the router and we'll start cutting. So there's that lap joint cabinet door, and you can see there's the area that we cut out, and because the router bit has rounded edges, it leaves these rounded. So depending on what you're putting in there, you could make those square. For example, if you're putting glass or stained glass or something in there. If you're just putting plywood, you could actually just round over the plywood, be easy to put in there. You could use nails to tack it like a picture frame, or you could use little pieces of wood, manufacture little pieces of wood and tack that on there, which is ideal because then you can easily replace the inserts in there. And the front of the door looks exactly like any other door. The rail is between the two stiles, so it doesn't look anything different than any other door. It's just another way of doing it and a quick way of making so the inserts go in quickly. Now, the third door is something called a slab door, and that's because it's just a single sheet of something. In this case, I've taken a piece of double-sided MDF. You can see that it's melamine on both sides, and I actually even put some melamine on the side here because the wood side is what you would typically be covering. And so when you open the door, of course, you want to see something like that. Now, the advantage with these, of course, and you're always going to be using European hinges in a door like this because that's the easiest thing to use. So the advantage with these, you can use MDF, you can use plywood, you can use natural wood, all sorts of different components you can use, and you don't have to worry about any cutting. You can cut it on your table saw and do the edging however you want to do the edging, whatever the material is. Put on European hinges, and it's that simple. The disadvantage, of course, is not always that attractive. Now, if you're getting some really nice wood, maybe some oak or something like that, it can be quite attractive. The other thing is, because it's a slab door, it's typically heavier than any of the other components where you might have a panel in the center. But easy to make, easy to apply, and if you've ever ordered a kitchen in a box, for example, where you get all the components, this is what you'll typically get, is you'll typically get a slab doors to go on there. So just another option in making doors. Now, the fourth kind of door we're going to look at today is, this is actually basically a mortise and tenon, but we cut this on the router, and all of the components, you can see the slots go all the way through on the uprights and, of course, on the rails, on the horizontal parts. So, but before we get started in assembly here, let's have a quick look at how this goes together on the router table. Okay, here's why we always cut the tongues first. Now, I've put the bit in there and I've aligned it by eye as best I can, but what I want to do now is I want to check it against the bit. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to touch it barely to the end of the tongue there. And what I want to see the wood flaring on both sides there. If it only flares on one side, then I'll need to drop the bit down or up, depending on where the flare is. So let's just go ahead and make that cut. And in that case, if you look carefully, you can see it just flares on the bottom. What was the bottom? So that means that I need to drop that bit down ever so slightly. So I'll go ahead and do that. Okay, I've dropped that bit down a tiny bit. Let's take another test cut. And now we can see that there's just a little bit of flaring on both sides. That's exactly what we want. That's the best way to align that bit. All right, now that we've got all of our components, we're going to assemble this, and just like some of the other frames that we've made here. I'm going to flip these over so that we put the face side down, and that's because I want the face side to be nice and flat. I always want the face side to be flat, and laying on this MDF wood here, it's going to do that. So first of all, I of course want to do a bit of a dry fit here and make sure all the components line up, everything is straight and is going to be square. Now, the reason I want to do it on this side is because I'm also going to be using my 23 gauge pinner from the back now and just put some pins in there so that when I glue this, I can pin it, it won't move, I could take this off and move on to the next frame. So there's the mortise and tenon version of a cabinet door, and if you look real closely on the back here, you can just barely make out where the 23 gauge pins went in there to stabilize that. But that is an excellent frame, and you can see where the tenon is on that, and that's kind of a nice little feature to have when you see that. Quick and easy. The setup takes a few minutes on the router, but this is probably, of all of the frames, this is probably the easiest to make, and it's a good rugged frame, so it's a good alternative for cabinet doors. Well, that leads us to the last door, and for those of you who already have a Dowel Max doweling machine, doweling jig, yes, you can make doors with your doweling jig, and I'm going to show you how. And of course you can do hundreds of other, well, dozens of things with your Dowel Max other than make doors, but a lot of people don't know that you can make doors with them as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do a quick overview on how you do this and actually start putting this together and show you how that works. So of course you can see that I've got my face edge here, and there's the face edge of my dowel so that I make sure that I get these always in the same place. So what I'm going to be doing is drilling a couple of holes in there, and then I'm going to be drilling a couple of holes in here as well, and that will fit right in there like that. That's going to be a super strong door, easy to put together, and just one of the best in my opinion. This is probably, of all of the panel doors, this is the strongest. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this and make a couple cuts, and then I'll do the other cuts off camera, and I'll show you how to put it together. Okay, so there's all my components, and let's just go ahead and assemble this. Now these dowels can be a little bit snug in here sometimes, and you may have to tap them in. That's good. Now today I'm not going to be gluing this. Normally I would be gluing this, but I want to save this for another demonstration that I'm doing later on, and this way I can sort of assemble and reassemble it. There we go. Now if you can look closely, and you won't be able to see from there, but I have perfect alignment here of the front of this, because that's what that doweling jig does. So there's, in my estimation, this will be the strongest frame you will ever put together. So this is actually perfect for things like stained glass, where you've got a heavier panel to put in here, a nice solid panel in there. So there's another option of making cabinet doors. Well, that concludes my video on making doors, 5 different kinds of doors. And each door has a purpose and a place that you can use it. It really depends what you're using it for. I also did a video a couple of years ago on panels, what you can do for panels or even restoring doors. That video will show up here. It may be something interesting that you want to have a look at. There's a detailed article on Woodwork Web about these and sort of what I used and the bits and so on that I used to put these together. So you'll be able to go and check that out. But it's an important video for anybody who wants to continue their furniture making abilities. Making doors is important, or if they just want to restore a bathroom or a kitchen doors in there, there's a good way of doing it. So I'm Colin Canet for Woodwork Web. Thanks for watching.